Hello and welcome to Let's Talk Physical. I'm Portia Sabin, president of the Music Business Association, and somewhere around here is my colleague Steve Harkins. Hopefully he'll be jumping on in a second.
I'm here.
Oh, there you are. Hi.
Hi, Portia. Hello, everyone.
How's everybody today? I'm excited for this one in particular. This has been such a fun series for us to do, Steve, but this one in particular is really exciting for me because we're going to talk about some issues that I think are really important and that the retail community doesn't get to hear about that often. So I'm excited for that.
Yeah, absolutely. So just, again, to let everyone know, I'm sure you looked at the topics, but, we're going to get another update from Luminate, the company formerly known as MRC and of course, SoundScan before that, on the industry's physical sales trends, and then also get reaction from retailers. And then we'll check in with the pressing plants on the current state of pressing, and then also a glimpse into the future from their standpoint. And then, as Portia touched on, a fascinating look at recent royalty rate increases and the impact it has on many of us in the musical ecosystem. I just wanted to thank the Physical Music Action Committee, Ken Glazer from Alliance, Carrie Calden from Record Store Day and Department of Record Stores, Justin Johnson, Darkside Records, Marquetta Rodriguez from Sirius Sounds, John Kuntz from Waterloo Records, Sue Vega from Ingram Entertainment, Andrea Peschel from the Coalition of Independent Music Stores, Carl Mello from Newbury Comics, and Michael Kurtz from Record Store Day and Department of Record Store Day. And then, of course, for Music Biz, Portia Sabin, who helps support this initiative, and the one who helps us drive Let's Talk Physical, Nicole Hennessy. Nicole, thanks for all you do. And then behind the scenes, Aaron, who's driving the engine. So, Portia, anything else to add before we jump into it?
Yeah, today is September 21st, although I feel very weird because I'm in Hamburg for Reeperbahn, so I've been awake for a while, and if I don't make a lot of sense, that's why. I'm going to use myself up top. But we at Music Biz just released our call for proposals for next year's Music Biz. So check your inboxes, everybody. There's a lot of information in there. Call for proposals for panels. We also, call for nominations for the Busy Awards, our new awards show that went over really well last year. We're expecting it to be even better this year. So please check your inboxes, go to musicbiz.org, find out all about that, and get involved because this music ecosystem is always stronger when we work together. And that's part of what we do with Let's Talk Physical, bring everyone together so that we can talk about the issues.
Absolutely. And Portia, you do know you are right now based in the town that helped the world's greatest band cut their chops, none other than the Beatles. We spent many a night and early morning in Hamburg.
That's right. I forgot about that. Hamburg is beautiful. I've never been here before. It's an absolutely beautiful city. I really sort of wasn't prepared for that. So this is a real perk.
Absolutely. Well, you look wide awake. So thanks for being here. And and with that, providing industry sales insights from Luminate, Senior Director, Music Insights and Industry Relations. Please welcome Jamie Marconet. Hello, Jamie.
Hello, everybody. Jamie Marconet, Senior Director of Music Insights and Industry Relations at Luminate. Really excited to speak today with you. So thank you so much for having me. We're gonna jump in to our Let's Talk Physical from our Luminate data side. Let me go ahead and share my screen. Are you seeing the full, sorry. Sorry, let me share once more on that, guys. Apologies on that.
You're allowed, Jamie. It's live.
Yeah,
We're
totally.
forgiving group.
Thought we had it all set there. But are you seeing my slides all right?
We can, yeah, we can see the slides on the side, and then in the center, the primary slide that you're on.
Okay. Sorry about this, guys. Let me try this one more time. I need to get out of. Okay, I think we've got it this time.
Great. Sorry, I couldn't help. I failed an AV in high school, Jamie.
There we
There you
go. I'm
go.
sorry about that. Apologies, everybody. Again, Jamie Markinette, Senior Director of Music Insights and Industry Relations at Luminate. Really excited to be speaking with you today. So thank you so much for having me. What we're going to dive into is the physical product market. We're going to discuss the vinyl landscape in 2022 and touch a little bit on cassettes as well. It's a really, really fun one. I know that we've spoken with you all in the past. I believe the last time was in March, and in that one, it was a look back at 2021. So in this one, I really wanted to focus more in on what's happening in 2022. And for those who might not be as familiar with Luminate, we are formerly known as PMRC, formerly known as MRC, SoundScan, Nielsen Music. We do power the iconic Billboard charts with our data. We have first-party data that's coming in from the DSPs. We work with the physical marketplace as well to keep track of sales. And from all of the data that's coming in, we are able to, really look in at a macro level to what's happening across the industry. So today we are going to be diving in on the physical and album marketplace in 2022. So when we're looking at 2022 against 2021, and just for reference, most of the numbers, the vast majority of the numbers that we're going to see today are up through week 35. So that would be ending 9/1. When we're looking at this period compared to the 2021 year, across the board, there is a downward trend of 8%. So that's taken into cassettes, vinyl, CD, and digital albums. But what we are also going to see is that we are trending a little bit higher than 2020. So as you can see on this graph, there was actually an uptick in 2021. But even though we are down 8%, we are trending above 2020. Just for some reference, digital albums are down 44% from 2020. CDs are down 6%, but LPs are actually up 94% from 2020. So looking at this graph, there was a really big jump in LP sales from 2020 to 2021. The great news is that is actually holding right now, and we are just above the LP mark for 2021. So, even though we're down 8% overall, sort of making up for some of that with the LP sales. Again, it is the digital albums and it's the CDs that are down more. Also, we are seeing that there is a growing cassette market. We found that between 2020 and 2021, cassettes actually doubled. They went from 173,000 to 343,000. And right now, cassettes are on pace to beat that 343,000 number from 2021. So this is growing. We are seeing artists across various genres that are also going in and providing cassettes to fans. And we're going to dive into that a little bit more in a little bit deeper in as well. On vinyl, on LPs, the numbers right now are pretty close to the 2021 numbers. It's actually pretty phenomenal. They're actually only about 20,000 units apart, which is pretty remarkable when you look at it. So vinyl is really holding steady right now. This is another graph. It really shows, diving into that vinyl number. 2020, 27.5 million. As I mentioned, there was that really big jump to into 2021, where there was 41.7 million vinyl sold. So if you're looking at it right now, we have already sold 94% of the vinyl that was sold in the total of 2020. So things are really, really good there, and it's holding strong. If you look at the album sales breakdown year to date, just to see where the different sales are coming from, vinyl is 41.2%, CDs 36.4%, digital albums 22%, and then cassettes, that little sliver right there, but 0.4%. What we're also noticing, though, is that in vinyl, there are more current vinyl being sold. So the current vinyl marketplace has been growing. So here's a look from 2020 up through 2021, and then 2022 year to date. And as you can see, the vinyl current share just grows, 27.1% to 29.3% to 31.1%. This is actually in contrast to what we're seeing on the streaming side, where it's been a really, really big topic of conversation. But on the streaming side, catalog is actually growing with 34% of streaming coming from the years 2017 to 2019. So it is interesting to see that on the vinyl side, that current product is actually starting to eat into that pie chart a little bit more. As we dive into what's happening, this is showing that where we're seeing those currents really come from is country. That is, a large part of Taylor Swift's Taylor's versions, which are the number 1 and number 3 current vinyl sellers, as well as hip hop. So, when looking at this graph, you can see that rap and hip hop's change in terms of their percentage change of current is up 12.7%. But look at that country number, 34.8% in the middle graph at the bottom right. And that really is driven by a lot of the Taylor Swift re-releases that came in, because they are new master recordings. They are considered current product. And so that is pushing country. And that is also, when you start looking at, Harry Styles breaking the vinyl record for 1 week when his album Harry's House came out in May with 182,000. There are a lot of these current pop artists that are making really, really big gains in vinyl. Olivia Rodrigo is another one. And so this is really pushing the current vinyl sales. What's also interesting, if we stay on this slide for just a little bit more, is that our market research team went out and said, well, who are the vinyl buyers? And what was interesting to come out of is, we did see men. 31% of men are millennial, 31% Gen X. Those are the vinyl breakouts for the male category. But for females, the vinyl buyers are actually 34% Gen Z. So it is young females who are buying the vinyl when looking at women, which is really interesting. Looking at the different store stratas, Indian internet mail order are the biggest vinyl sellers. Indie is 52% overall for this year, up through 9/1, and internet mail order is 30%. That big spike there in the middle, that is Record Store Week, and we are going to dive in a little bit more on that. But when that spike happened, for Record Store Day, 77% of the vinyl LPs of that week, where that big spike is, came from indie stores. And then also that week, internet mail order was number 2 at 15%. Diving into, mass merchant stores versus indie stores and looking at the vinyl titles that they sell, One thing that's really, really interesting from this graph is if you look at the mass merchant sum of share versus long tail. So what this graph is showing is for mass merchant stores, what titles are making up the bulk of their sales. And so top 10 comes in at, just around 30%. The top 11 to 100 vinyl albums in the marketplace makes up about 50% of sales, but that is the largest chunk. So mass merchants are selling most of the titles that would be in the 1 to 100 range of all vinyl sales. If you look at indie, though, it does go deeper, and they're selling, more than 40% is coming from titles that would be ranked 101 to 1000. So they are providing a deeper breadth of LPs to their buyers. And so while mass merchant stores are selling the vinyl hits, you can say that indie stores are selling a deeper, more diverse catalog of records to the fans. Taking a look at what we're seeing for the top 10 vinyl albums of 2022, and this sort of goes back to that current conversation that we had. So there are 3 currents in this top 10, and looking at the numbers overall, it also makes up 46% of the top 10 sales. Harry's House to date is the #1 vinyl seller, 346, as mentioned earlier. He did break the record with 182,000 in 1 week in May. Olivia Rodrigo, #2, and then Tyler, the Creator, coming in at #5, but that is a current record as well. Also throughout this, you see, Fleetwood Mac continues to sell, as does Nirvana's Nevermind as well. Looking at the top vinyl artists of the year, Harry Styles is at #1. But Taylor Swift, and again, she did release the Taylor's Version records, and that has really, really pushed her as well. Throughout the rest of the list, we do see, the Beatles and Metallica, Billie Eilish, and Fleetwood Mac too, as just some of the call outs. But, Harry Styles coming in at #1 really does reinforce, I think, sort of the current sellers on this. And we see his name, at the top of the list for this year. One thing that I also wanted to share with you, when we're looking back at, CD and vinyl sales for this year, this graph shows where Record Store Day came in. So the red line is up until, just after September is current. And then we also have the CD sales for 2022. Where the graph changes is actually, I wanted to share what happened last year, just so we could also see what the holiday period brought. But when looking at the first 3/4 of the year, you can definitely see those spikes around Record Store Day. I mean, that really, really pushed the levels. The one in late April was a higher volume than the one that then occurred in June, but they both did push a lot of product. If we look at the CD trend, it is pretty stable, but diving in on the spikes that you see, that BTS album, they sold 250,000 copies of their CD, and you can see that spike there just before July. And then again, when Beyonce's album came out, that is the second spike for the CDs of the year. Other than that, it's been fairly stable week to week, but you can see that those 2 releases definitely, created the spikes. Moving into the last quarter of the year, again, this is now where it switches to 2021. The holiday season, which was 11/1 through the end of the year, looking at the total sales for 2021, there were 26% of the total sales for the year for LPs came in that period, and that's where you see that spike. CDs 25%. So just wanted to call that out as going into the holiday period, that from looking at 2021, that within those 2 months sold 26% of the year for LPs and 25% for CDs. And a topic that is coming up a lot, and we are seeing some growth in this area. I mentioned earlier that cassette sales nearly doubled from 2020 to 2021, where they jumped from 173,000 units to 343,000. What's impressive though is that we're already at 274,000 for this year, and so it is on pace to grow again. We are also seeing that a third from our market research team, self-reported, we are seeing that a third of cassette buyers are Gen Z. And as I called out earlier, we are seeing artists like Billie Eilish, The Weeknd, releasing cassettes. And then also on the rock side, Ozzy Osbourne released a cassette for Patient Number 9, which came out a couple of weeks ago. So, the cassette format is popular across the board, with a diverse group of artists that are putting it out. And we are also seeing that the cassette buyers spend 227% more money across music categories than the average music listener. So we are seeing this sort of manifest itself as, artists then putting cassettes into their e-com stores and things like that. It's definitely something to keep an eye on. Again, we're talking 343,000 units for 2021 and above that for 2022, but it is worthy of keeping an eye on because it does seem that the consumers are buying. And anytime we see a format on our side that makes a jump like 173,000 to 343,000, just something to note and be aware of as things progress with this format, and fans who are looking to purchase it as another emblem of their fandom, and to continue to connect with their artists. And that does bring the report to an end. I stopped sharing my screen, but again, really, really excited to share these insights with you. And thanks for having me today.
Jamie, great insights, terrific presentation. Thank you so much for putting that together for us. And again, reason to, for all of us to feel optimistic. Couple of takeaways and observations was, I guess we need to start pinging the manufacturers on looking at producing some cassette players, perhaps. I know the numbers, aren't, and when you look at them, they still have a ways to go, but still exceeding 300,000 from last year, still a pretty meaningful number.
Yeah, Steve, definitely. And I thought the same thing. I did when I saw those numbers. I was, wondering where, somebody could, honestly, for somebody could purchase a cassette player right now.
Yep.
And again, it's not millions, but it is something to keep an eye on, and it is a product that fans are purchasing, and they are being sold in artist stores also for a pretty good price.
Right.
So just wanted to make sure to call that out as something to keep an eye on.
Yeah, great call out. And then on the vinyl side of it, what's really exciting, as you look at the individual artist numbers, you cited Harry Styles, almost 500,000 vinyl units. That's significant. And then still looking at catalog, Fleetwood Mac Rumors at over 200,000. Those are big numbers.
They are big numbers. And going back to the Harry Styles example as well, that is great to see that these currents are starting to sell like that, because I think that is a really good indication of the strength of the product. And also it's always great to see new consumers coming in, younger consumers coming in and buying something, because, looking into the future and how that could possibly trend, bringing in younger consumers is always a healthy outlook.
Boy, you're exactly right. That was, we refer to them as lost generations for physical music consumption, and that's proof positive that we're bringing them back, and really hope for the future too, because some of those consumer behaviors will stick as they get older, and hopefully we'll continue to to draw in younger generations of fans. So all good news. The only other thing I was going to throw out there, I mean, we could talk about this for hours, but a lot of retailers have been calling it out, and we're seeing it in the numbers. Please press rap and hip hop artists, and we saw there was an increase of almost 13%. So, proof there too that, there's certainly an appetite and a need for more rap and hip hop artists to release their albums on vinyl.
Yeah, definitely. Seeing that those currents go up is excellent to see. So, there's
Yep.
always the classic hits, right, as well, that are always, popular, but to see the currents going up, I really, really enjoy seeing that. And I think it gives an optimistic look for the future.
Yeah, we want to get to retail, but one other important point to throw out there, again, an observation from me. I think it correlates to what we're seeing in terms of production of vinyl. But you had cited the shift in current and new titles versus catalog on vinyl, and it appears that some of that may be the shift, from the labels and producing more units on new releases, and also the volume of new releases. There seems to be more emphasis, and of course, you've got the variants. We've got several SKUs related to a single artist release. And from my perspective, we're still extremely bullish on catalog. It's really more of a production issue. And hopefully in the next couple of years, we'll talk to plants, we'll hear from them. As production ramps up, we'll be able to introduce more titles in addition to improving day and date on vinyl.
Definitely. Yeah, that would be excellent. We have seen some examples where vinyl has come later. I think Tyler, the creator, had an example earlier this year where his vinyl did come after the original album release Street Date, but he ended up doing incredibly well with that, sold 50,000 units, and was able to retake the #1 spot on the Billboard Top 200.
Yep.
So I think that there's definitely different strategies, but to for the labels, you have to get the master in so far ahead of time if you want to try to make your album release date and have it on vinyl at the same time. It's definitely a complication, to try to, when you're looking at your timelines, because sometimes artists don't give you the
Yep.
master that
Yeah, a
that far in
challenge for
advance.
sure. Yeah, our model with artistic creativity doesn't necessarily work with how you'd like to plan for production.
Exactly.
Yeah, well, Jamie, thanks so much, Jamie Marconet from Luminate. Terrific to see you, and thanks again for your time and for pulling this together. We really appreciate it. And don't think of this as like a State of the Union where it's a rebuttal. This is just carrying the conversation to retail. And so let's hear from them, their perspectives regarding sales over the summer, along with how September's looking, and also their vision on the balance of the year. And with that, from Newbury Comics Director of Brand Engagement, Carl Mello, and also the Executive Director of the Coalition of Independent Music Stores, Andrea Pichel. We'll start with you, Carl. I call you Nostradamus Jr. You've definitely pointed me in the right direction on a number of fronts, including K-pop. You were one of the first out there embracing it. What say you, Carl, as far as current business, and also how do you see the balance of the year?
Well, current business is good. It's not growing like we saw last year. And I don't see any reason that the rest of the year won't continue as it has been for the last couple of months. I think some of the things that we're already alluding to are probably the most important things to concentrate on. I'd like to pull out a couple of things from the chat with Chrissy mentioning the Lil Nas X not being available on vinyl, Edward mentioning Bad Bunny not being available on vinyl. We also have, Steve Lacy, like the biggest record in the country for months. There's no vinyl there. Drake, Post Malone, blah, 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 blah. So the problems, the numbers that we've put up this year are actually fairly astonishing considering the lack of availability on one side. Whether that means the title is just not available at all or gated to D2C or just not wide at retail, those are all real issues. And the other factor that I think is playing a role in this sort of steadying of performance is pricing, where you have many of the big release or the quote unquote big releases of the year that haven't turned out to be, relatively speaking, that big on vinyl. Things like Kanye or Kendrick or Juice WRLD these are all titles that have a cost to the retailer of around $30 or more. So, you know, that's something. And when you have Universal put through a price change of thousands of titles, where all of a sudden things like Rockin' Around the Christmas Tree by Brenda Lee is now a $19 cost to the retailer item. There's we're divorcing ourselves from reality a bit there. So I think, you know, pricing and availability are the things that we really have to worry about right now. When we've done things to kind of play against that pricing, either by having we had a pretty aggressive sale on our website, and we have a top 40 section in our stores that's aggressively priced. Growth there is explosive. We had the biggest day in our website's history after, you know, I don't know, 10 years of selling tons of vinyl online. We had our biggest day last month amidst this slowdown, but at prices that, you know, got people off their seats. So to me, I'm looking at that as like the two biggest issues of the moment. It's like we need more Steve Lacy, less Herman's Hermits. We need pricing to kind of be related to reality. And yeah, and we'll be rocking.
Yeah, well said, Carl. Yeah, and I'd like to think too, I mean, you know, the pressures of costs increasing, we know a lot of those are legitimate, whether or not the number it's increased to at the SKU level, you know, maybe it can be debated, but hopefully as goes supply chain improvements, and the economy starts to improve at some point, who knows when, that, you know, if we continue to maintain the demand of the consumers, that, you know, as prices go up, prices can also justifiably go down if the costs associated go down as well. And hopefully that's something down the road that we'll be able to revisit. But great insights as always, Carl. And let's reach out to our good friend Andrea and her perspective, representing a host of independent retailers through the Coalition of Independent Music Stores. Hi, Andrea.
Hi, everybody. Yeah, I mean, I think everything that Carl mentioned was like key points. The things I was thinking about during the presentation, I think you're seeing a little bit of interest, especially from the younger consumer with cassettes. I think that's starting to become a thing because of a couple of different reasons. I think we've all seen like the Stranger Things phenomena. There's like this huge nostalgia for 80s culture and 90s culture and all of that. So I think that's where you see like the cassette being an attractive kind of, there's that novelty and nostalgia there. But I also think that it's a way for a consumer with maybe a limited amount of expendable income to maybe get like 2 new artists that they want, because you are seeing, you know, cool artists that are putting out these cassettes. I think you're being able to buy more because there's a little bit more, not always like what I remember paying for cassettes, but I think still comparatively to vinyl, it's like a little bit more of an attractive price point. And then I see the appeal to do it because even from maybe the artist or labels, just like availability and being able to make that happen closer to like day and date or things like that. I think with vinyl, you know, I was also thinking about during the presentation that how current is really, you know, holding strong and even growing. And I'd love to see what that number would look like if, to Carl's point, like we did have vinyl on some of these releases that we should. And, you know, I also think that like, you know, again, looking at the indie retail sector, we go a lot deeper. We're not just, you know, carrying like the new releases. So there's a much more breadth of catalog. And I think that catalog number would look radically different if there was enough capacity to encompass the production of all of the new releases, all of the different variants. And, you know, because I think catalog is the one that has to take the hit because those are older albums that have already been out, but obviously there is demand there for that catalog. So it would be really interesting to see what those numbers would look like if we just didn't have the limitations of production that we have. And yeah, I mean, I think that's really kind of my key takeaways. You know, I know everybody's struggling with production. I deal with it on a day-to-day level on the Think Indie distribution side as well, just trying to get product here and into the stores. I would also say like PDAC, we spend a lot of time talking about, and the the task force for shipping and everything. I think there's nothing worse than, it's hard enough to get a release to begin with, and then like your order shows up and it's damaged. So I think we still have to continue to put a focus on proper shipping techniques and giving special care to these fragile products that we're trying to sell, because that's devastating when a lot of work went in from the artist level down to get these records into your door, and then they're ruined. So that would be my takeaways.
Yep. Thank you, Andrea. Great insight as well. Also appreciate everybody's input on the cost side. Michelle, Shock, and Scott don't disagree. Double negative there, but you raise a really good point. And we got an email, Carl, from the lead singer of Hermits, Peter Noon. Why all the hate on Hermits? I kid you. I kid you, sir.
Why not?
All good. Thank you both. Really appreciate your insights. And here's to hopefully a strong fourth quarter. Appreciate all you do out there. And thanks for your time today.
Absolutely. Happy to be here.
Great. Next, we're fortunate to have with us great representation from the pressing plants, which of course are a critical segment of the physical music food chain. We have today the CEO from Furnace Records, Eric Astor. We also have from Memphis Vinyl Pressing, co-founder and CEO, Brandon Sievers. And last but certainly not least, from Precision Record Pressing, we have the president, Sean Johnson. So first to the three of you, thank you all so very much for taking time out during your busy day. In a sense, we'd rather have you work in the lines, but your insights and input are really important. So we'll try to make it brief, and it's great that you're here today. So thank you very much. To each of you, if you would share with us current state of affairs as far as production, how things are looking, and then also if we can get a vision from where you stand in terms of your operations, but also what you're hearing in the marketplace as far as other plants. You're forecasting in terms of what 2023 and 2024 looks like. Hopefully, and I believe there are rays of hope in terms of improvement on production. So with that, Eric, I'll ask you maybe to start, if you would, to get your prognosis on the current state of affairs and also the future.
Well, thanks for having me. Things are going a little better than they had been earlier in the year. For us, at least, the access to PVC and supplies have gotten a little easier. So, we've been able to do more with more customers. Colored vinyl has become a lot easier to supply. And as you know, I think like more than 50% of our pressings are on color vinyl, and it's very important for the artists and all their variants and exclusive store releases and stuff like that. So we take that really seriously, and we really tried to hone in on having a constant supply of that. One thing that we have been a little concerned with is just the access to equipment. We buy presses from a company in Sweden, and they're really slow going right now because everyone wants to buy vinyl record presses. And so it's been hard to get, presses as well as some of the spare parts. So that's a little bit of a challenge. But all in all, I think, labor is a big issue. Finding good people to run presses and assemble records and do all the hard work. That's been, I think that's a pain point for everyone these days. But in terms of supply and everything else, it's turning it's going in the right direction. It's not great, but it's definitely better than it was earlier in the year and last year for sure.
So, just a follow up on that, Eric. So, we don't talk about it as much, but labor has not improved that dramatically, right? So that does remain, as you said, a continuing challenge, both in terms of consistency, right, as far as quality control with having employees that stick, and then also, if you continue to ramp up, you obviously need more labor and qualified labor that you spend the time training that hopefully stays with the company.
And that's the big thing is retention. I think we treat our folks pretty well, and everyone just got raises. We share in the as the company does better, all of our staff does better, but what it comes down to is really hard work. Pressing a vinyl record is a lot of work. It's a little bit dangerous sometimes,
Right.
It's you're on your feet all day, so people have this idea that it's going to be this amazing job working in the music business, and then they get here and you're grinding away all day, and that's not for everyone. So finding the right kind of personality that's willing to work hard is tough these days. And we've got a great crew, but adding, for every 3 people we add, we get one good employee out of it. So we're working right now with trade schools and other local community colleges to try to recruit people that are entering into the trade. And at some point, I think we're going to set up a program with one of the local community colleges to actually create a vinyl record pressing major, because I think it'd be kind of cool, and everyone's excited about it at the college. So hopefully we can start that program, and that would be a benefit for the pressing community as a whole.
Yeah, great approach. I think you got to be creative, right, in this day and age in terms of attracting personnel. And who knows, maybe as a sidebar, we can talk to Music Biz to see if, with the connections with a number of the colleges in the marketplace too, maybe there's some help there. And I'm not looking for you to stretch the truth, but just wanted to say, I was going to recommend that we start up a volunteer program with everyone here. Maybe they can donate some time during the weekend to work at Furnace and some of the other fine plants. But unfortunately, you just mentioned it was hard work, so we might have dissuaded a few people, and dangerous. Although we do consider work in the music industry sometimes dangerous as well. But appreciate your insights on that, and congratulations for the continued great work Furnace
Thanks.
does. And with that, Brandon, turn it over to you again. Kind of prognosis on how things are going from your perspective in Memphis, and also what does 2023 and 2024 look like from where you sit?
Well, thanks for having me. I think that, just to echo on a couple of things that Eric said, labor has been a huge challenge for us, a bigger challenge in Memphis because we're in the middle of a massive expansion right now. And, vinyl is sexy for about a week. And then after that, it becomes a really hard job. And that's what we try to put out there first and foremost for the folks when they come to the door. It's like, yeah, that sex appeal is going to wear off after a moment. But yeah, it's definitely a really, it's a tough job. Vinyl is also, it's a little more magic than it is science. And so it takes a really special kind of person to come in and make a good record, because making records is not easy. Making good records is damn near impossible. But as far as the state of the industry goes, our biggest concern over the past couple of years really is, we came out of COVID in 2020 and the industry really just exploded. Our biggest concern has been that exhaustion would set in across the board, at the retail level, with the retailers, with the customer, and we've heard that today from the retail side, that availability is really at the top of the list of, of the pain points and the pressure points in this, on the retail side. And so for us, last year we took a look at what the demands of the industry, were and where we were as a plant in Memphis. And we decided that we were going to go big or go home. So, we're in the midst of an expansion that's going to more than triple our capacity in Memphis. And so that will be online just here in a month or so. We'll start phasing that in to be completed by the end of the first quarter in 2023. And we're really excited about that because it really touches on that availability issue. If you look at the trends and at retail, that the current is really outpacing catalog. And, and I agree with Andrea that that's really just because of availability. The catalog gets put on the back burner because, your A-listers have got to have their vinyl. And I think Harry Styles is a good indicator of that. If he's got his vinyl, he can sell it. So, this major expansion that we're working on, that we hope to have online soon, finished up by the end of the first quarter, we're really hoping that that's going to be a good pressure relief for the industry. It's definitely going to be a pressure relief for us because we're sitting on millions and billions of units of open orders that we just can't touch because of unavailable capacity. So we're excited about that. It's it doesn't come without challenges. When you're talking about labor, we've got to add about 300 employees in the next 8 months in Memphis. And so we are turning over every rock and pulling out every stop and getting creative for sure to try and fill those spots. I mean, we've increased our base wage by almost 35% over the past year to reward people for what they're doing, to kind of keep pace with with what's going on in the world, make sure we have a living wage for our people, because we want to take care of those people. Without them, we couldn't do what we do. But supply chain, like Eric said, supply chain has eased up some, but I think that remains to be seen actually what happens as we enter the holiday season, which is when things kind of come to a grinding halt, or at least they slow down tremendously. But it's definitely going to be a big challenge for us over the next year, but we're excited to see what we can do by introducing some pressure relief into the industry.
Really appreciate that, Brandon. I'm going to let you and Eric virtual arm wrestle over this, but we have one volunteer already. James Cheek has said he would love to volunteer at one of the pressing plants. So, and 300 employees that you need to add to the mix is not insignificant. That's quite a task you have ahead of you. So, and I think that, it's really important everybody hears this, because we look at the increased costs. We talked about that. This isn't a charity. And of course you can't completely absorb that expense. And, some of that has to be shared with your clients, which of course are artists and the labels, to continue to keep the lights on. So it's important everybody gets a sense of that. So appreciate that, Brandon. And thanks for all you do.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And last but certainly not least, glad he's here. And he has been a regular with us for a number of these sessions. From Precision Pressing, we have, of course, Sean Johnson. First of all, Sean, congratulations, and thank you for that additional pressing plant that opened up, I believe, was in Nashville.
Yes, correct. Sorry, I'm joining a little bit late. I got some time zone confusion. I was eagerly anticipating starting in about 20 minutes.
You're good. You came in just in time, so it's perfect timing. Thanks for being here. So so two things that we're talking about, we've asked both Eric and Brandon to share with us, is kind of current state of affairs as far as production, and also your vision on 2023 and 2024, how that looks. But perhaps before we go down that road, can you share with us a little bit of behind the new operation in Nashville and how that's going?
Sure. We have a 100,000 square foot facility in Nashville, into which we're installing capacity to make about 90,000 records a day. We're 1/3 of the way through that process. First pressing started in June, and we should be complete with the installation and commissioning of the rest of the equipment by April or so of 2023, next year. So the most critical thing really is getting the first records pressed, because until you have a functional system, steam, cooling, etc., you can't press anything. So so far so good on that front. The 12 presses are running. We're producing about 20,000 records a day now in a couple of shifts.
Great news. And really for all three of you, I mean, you're in a unique situation where, there's competition, but at the end of the day, because the demand far exceeds, what you're pumping out in terms of units, you guys in a sense are kind of working in concert. It's, we're propping each other up by putting out the production right at this point. So Sean, how's business and production right now from where you see? And also, can you share with everyone where your facilities are? It's more than just Nashville, of course. Yeah,
well, I think we all can agree that it's not very healthy for the industry to be in this perpetual state of undersupply. it's nice if you're a manufacturer to have unlimited orders, but it's really not pleasant trying to push your capacity at over 100% of what it should be, because everything that goes wrong creates some problem and challenge. And in the supply chain crazy world that we live in, it makes it very difficult. So I'm convinced that the situation, because of all the efforts being undertaken by various entrepreneurs to bring more capacity, the situation will improve for the customers, so the labels and their customers, the people who are seeing a lot of product that they want to buy that's out of stock, right? I think that really will be in a much better place by the end of next year. Obviously, that depends a little bit on where demand goes, right? So if demand takes another big leg up, then we might be under pressure still going into the second half of next year, and the industry will have to add more capacity. But there really are a lot of good efforts going on by people to bring more capacity to the situation, and I think it'll be a much healthier environment going forward.
That's great news.
Yes. So the GZ North America group consists of the partnership that we have with Memphis, Precision Record Pressing in Canada, and the new operation in Nashville called Nashville Record Pressing. And the Precision and Memphis have been in business now for since 2015-16, and Nashville just started this year. We have expansion plans that have been mostly completed now at Precision, so completed last year. And this year is about now just working through supply chain and other fine tuning of the operation. I think the overall environment, to a certain degree, everybody kind of gets used to the difficulties on the supply chain. So it's, surprise, surprise, surprise coming along, everything's really hard. After a while, you start to get used to it. You wouldn't describe it as pleasant, but you kind of get used to dealing with curveballs coming in left, right, and center. And the customers get used to some disruption as well. We're all hopeful for some improvement on that front. I don't think we're seeing a lot of it. Paper and board are still complicated. Print turnaround times are extended. We're not seeing much improvement in terms of container deliveries. We bring a lot of material over from Europe, including most of our compound, and we have containers that take 8, 9, 10, 11 weeks to be delivered, and a lot of uncertainty, railway disruptions, etc. So it's hard to even predict when they will show up. And in our industry, we're all running, maybe 50% of our production in a range of colors, and the color management of the color compound is really challenging. But it doesn't seem like it's getting worse, and that's good. You kind of get used to it, and you start taking steps to try to mitigate some of the challenges. And I'm sure that we will see some improvements now going forward over the next 6 months or so.
That's great. Well, every time we talk to you folks, the takeaway is don't jump, folks. That things will get better for sure. And with that, Eric, any last words to our group?
No, thanks for your patience. We're doing our best. At some point, I think as an industry, we need to address this box issue, because I know retail is really struggling with that. And I've got some ideas, and I think we have a new trade association starting in North America, and we'll be sure to bring that up, and hopefully we can help fix that problem. But yeah, I think Sean and Brandon have covered most everything I would cover, and they did a great job.
Thank you, Eric. Brandon, how about on your end? Anything else you'd like to add?
Just to echo what Eric said, thanks for your patience. We know it's these past couple of years have been madness for everybody on this call. It's just been, overall insanity. But, I guess maybe we wouldn't have it any other way. Like Sean said, you kind of get used to the madness. Yeah. So, welcome to the fun house. But we appreciate your patience, and we really do know Sean and GZ and the group that we have together. We really feel like we're going to make a dent in this over the next year and a half. And we're looking forward to seeing what we can do.
That's great, Brandon. And Sean, how about you?
Any final words? No.
Yes, sir.
No, I think we've covered it. So.
So listen, you know, we know that retail, or, you know, we call them heroes because they deliver to the fans. We don't have a business without the creative output of artists, but you gentlemen and other plants are unsung heroes. Yeah, it's a business, and I have to take ownership for some of the challenges, but as you articulate, it's not an easy thing. And there's as Sean, as you said, there's very little room for error. And there's significant impact when it does happen. And, you know, this is not a flawless process that you folks undertake. So thanks for all you do. Really appreciate you taking the time to be here, sharing the insights. Wishing all of you a great and productive fourth quarter. And Brandon, help is on the way. You've got independent retailers now. They're volunteering to post open positions. You know, and maybe we can take it even further. So thank you, gentlemen, for being here. We know you're very busy, and really appreciate it. Eric Astor, Brandon Sievers, and Sean Johnson. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks,
Thanks,
everybody.
everyone.
Take care. And with that, we now are looking to segue into a really interesting look at the impact of copyright royalty rates. I'm very excited. And we have a great presentation. I was privy to some of it. So with that, I'll turn it over to Portia Sabin.
Thank you, Steve. So hello, everybody. Hi. This is a topic that a lot of retailers probably aren't super familiar with, but I saw Danielle Aguirre and Colin Rushing, my guests. Actually, Danielle was on a panel at the A2IM Indie Week sessions this summer, and Colin was there too. He wasn't on that panel, but it really opened my eyes to the issue of what this mechanical royalty rate increase is going to mean for the industry as a whole. And so I actually had a little explainer video put together, and so you guys are it's directed at retailers in particular, sort of the physical side of the world. So I'm going to show that to you guys. You're the first people who get to see it. And so I'd love some feedback. And then we're going to talk to Danielle and Colin.
In June 2022, the Copyright Royalty Board, or CRB, announced plans to increase mechanical royalty rates from 9.1 cents to 12 cents per copy. What does this mean for the music industry? While this is tremendous news for songwriters and publishers, let's take a look at the music ecosystem and how the system may be affected. The Copyright Royalty Board is made up of 3 judges who are appointed by the Librarian of Congress to determine the mechanical royalty rate. Mechanical royalties are what songwriters and publishers get paid every time one of their songs is sold. A physical album is traditionally made up of 10 songs and is sold as a full album download, a CD, or an LP. With a mechanical royalty rate of 9.1 cents per song for 10 songs per album, record labels have historically paid 91 cents of every album sold, or $1.82 for double albums, directly to the publisher or songwriter. With the CRB rate increase, record labels will now pay publishers and songwriters $1.20 per physical album sale, or $2.40 for double albums. This is a good thing for publishers and songwriters since they deserve to be paid for their work. However, there will be an effect of this rate increase on other sectors of the industry that can't be ignored. Let's take a look at what is likely to happen. Record labels' publishing costs will increase by 32%. And that increase could be passed down the distribution chains and ultimately affect retailers who might have to increase their prices for customers. Right now, there is a robust market for vinyl in the US, and there's probably some wiggle room on what the consumer can bear, but charging more to the consumer is always difficult. In addition, the CRB judges link the mechanical royalty rate to the consumer price index for the first time. So the mechanical royalty rate will be linked to inflation and grow each year. So a rate increase that is good for songwriters and publishers makes things a little harder for labels, distributors, retailers, and ultimately consumers. While physical and download sales are less than 20% of the global music market, vinyl sales are growing and are an important part of the industry's past, present, and future. At Music Biz, we view our industry as an ecosystem with changes in one part affecting the whole. We hope this video helped you understand this particular change. And look out for our next episode on the CRB rate increase for streaming mechanical royalties.
Ta-da. So with that, I know that's a lot in just 2 little minutes, but I'd like to welcome my guests. My guests today are Colin Rushing, who is formerly the Chief Legal Officer at Sound Exchange and is now the principal at Duck Road Advisory LLC, and Danielle Aguirre, who is the EVP and General Counsel of the National Music Publishers Association. Welcome, you guys. Thanks so much for coming to be with us today.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Glad to have you. So I think that little explainer video is helpful because at least it lays out the pieces of the situation, the Copyright Royalty Board that people probably don't know much about. And then the sort of takeaway, which really impressed me at A2IM at Indie Week, which is that, a 32% increase in mechanical royalties costs for record labels, especially independent record labels, can be significant and could be, something that has an effect on the rest of the ecosystem.
I think that's right, but I think it's also warranted. I mean, if you look back, the rate has been 9.1 cents since 2006. That's kind of unprecedented to not in any way increase the rate in, 16 years. And if you look prior to 2006, there was actually an industry agreement beginning in 1978 that rose that rate from 2.75 cents to 9.1 cents basically with increases every 2 years from 78 to 2006. And so prior to 2006, labels and publishers came together and voluntarily entered into an agreement that rose rates, pretty regularly over the course of that almost 20-year period. And so this is actually a period in which rates have stayed stagnant. And so I think a rate at this point is probably warranted.
Yeah, I'll just jump in. I mean, I think Daniel's right. I mean, it's sort of remarkable that these rates have been sort of at the same level for as long as they have. I think one of the things that, and Portia probably jumped out at you and resonated with me at the conference, was the disparate impact on different sectors of the label community. And so, when you look at the overall, I think physical is a pretty small percentage of total record industry revenue, but for some independent labels, it can be 30-40%. And potentially growing. There's a really interesting sort of process question, and in this whole thing, and Portia, you sort of alluded to this as well, which is how these sort of rates come to be in the first place. And it is kind of a mystery to almost everyone that's not like paying super close attention. I think one of the big headlines of this particular rate structure is a pretty small number of people are paying very close attention to the rates that labels pay. In fact, I think the original assumption was that they would just be pushed forward, and that the attention that the publishers were going to really focus on was on the streaming part of the market, because that is where all the growth is industry wide, and that is where there are sort of arguably bigger issues. And so the thing that was and trying to see if I can, without going too much into the sort of weeds of what can be a really boring and arcane thing, there was originally about 1.5 years ago a settlement that would have just pushed the rates forward. And what everyone expected to happen was the CRB just to sort of adopt those. The settlement was the result of negotiations, right? Everybody sort of weighs the costs and benefits of litigation. Is it really worth it to go to court? Because these proceedings can be very expensive, et cetera, et cetera. And the way that the CRB proceedings, Copyright Royalty Board proceedings ideally go is if you have the industry stakeholders reach a settlement and the CRB adopts those rates. Well, here, after the first settlement was reached, then a number of number of folks who did not participate in the actual proceeding said, wait a minute, started raising questions about, hey, what, was it really appropriate just to push these rates forward? Shouldn't we have a conversation about adjusting them? Well, procedurally, in the context of the case, those questions are honestly being raised sort of late. And ideally, and again, in an ideal process, there would have been a way for those questions to have been sort of bubbled up immediately early in the process so that they could have been taken account in the proceeding. So to sort of like circling back to my original point about the disparate impact on independent labels also, they didn't have their own sort of voice in the process early on. And there's some interesting process questions about how to make sure that that problem doesn't happen in the future. Because when you look at the last point I'll make again, and then I'll stop talking, because I could probably prattle on about CRB process for longer than anyone would want. But when you look at the way that this sort of rate increase came about, it wasn't the product of a litigated trial where people put on competing evidence. There wasn't really an opportunity for the parties to provide a sort of detailed account of how the industry is actually organized, raise sort of questions, et cetera, et cetera. It was a pretty quick process where the judges, the Copyright Royalty Board, kind of surprising lots of people, rejected the first settlement, made the point that, look, these rates have been the same for too long, they should be adjusted upward. And then basically a month later, the parties to the original settlement said, okay, we'll do what you want. That's sort of where we were. So it's not like most of the CRB trials that actually have a great big sort of body of evidence created that are used to sort of derive the rates. And again, I'm not saying that that's the best process. Ideally, again, you wouldn't have rates being litigated. But that is, I think, some sort of important context for kind of the situation that, again, independent labels are in right now.
Thanks. Yeah, thanks for that, Colin. I think, and I mean, I would like to echo what Danielle said, like, obviously, an increase in the rates for songwriters and publishers is a long time coming and very needed and necessary and well-deserved. And like Colin said, the system was actually set up to have sort of periodic increases over time that then like just didn't happen for this super long period of time. And then, all of the stuff that we've been talking about happened. I just, for me, I think it's really important that we get it clear what is actually going on, because I think it's too easy for people to start pitting pieces of the industry against each other, where it's like, oh, well, now that songwriters and publishers are getting more, that means, retailers are going to have to raise their prices maybe, or labels are going to have to raise their prices, or something is going to happen. And there becomes this sort of negative feedback loop where it's these people's fault that this happened, where I think it's more important to just understand the context. I always say that the music industry is a patchwork of historical accidents, which is like kind of true all the time. So it's not like nefarious dealings by necessarily one group of people, but it does have an effect down the line. And so, I thought that Let's Talk Physical would be a great forum for us to talk this through, because, it's important, a lot of times retailers don't know what's going on sort of up at the label level or the distributor level necessarily. And so this is one of those things that has changed in the ecosystem, and that is going to have some effects, especially given what, the state of physical retail is today. Michael Kurtz in the chat actually just asked a really good question, which is, what are your thoughts on how physical retail sales now make up 65 to 70% of new release sales, and how streaming income is mostly catalog? Do you guys have anything to say to that?
Well, I mean, I guess my question would be, and obviously I come from the publishing industry, so know less about retail sales, but I guess my question would be, when I was looking at sales of CDs, sales of digital downloads, and generally sales of vinyl, except for maybe last year, the retail price for all of those has remained remarkably consistent, right? The prices haven't gone up over time. So I guess my question is, you know, should that be a consideration? I understand in your video you portrayed it as a possible negative impact that we might have to raise prices to consumers, and I completely understand that. But, you know, in this era of unbelievably high inflation, is that not something that's a reasonable thing to suggest, in the same way that perhaps paying songwriters and music publishers a little bit more after like such a stagnant period is a reasonable thing to suggest, you know? And I'm just curious as to, you know, whether that's, people feel that the market could bear that. Certainly probably with vinyl it could, but with other formats that may not be increasing to the extent vinyl is.
Exactly. And that's, you know, this is going to be a sympathetic audience to say the next thing I'm going to say, which is that, you know, what about DSPs increasing their prices, which have also remained completely stagnant for the last
Fully
12.
sympathetic to that and agree strongly that they should also be thinking about increasing prices. Absolutely. It's unbelievable that that stayed the same since Spotify entered the market in 2011 in the US. I mean, it's yes, agree.
Yeah.
It's sort of wild. I mean, like one of the things I think for consumers have no idea, right? Like when they're consuming music, how the people are actually paid through the sort of process. They have no idea what the choices are. Pricing is like obviously like some function of consumer demand and the cost going into it. And one of the things that sometimes seems so anachronistic about the kind of rate structure we're talking about now, which is like the X cents per track, is it's totally disconnected from the actual formats we're talking about. And so like vinyl, those prices are going up. Like people are willing to pay a lot for vinyl. CDs, like the prices have, you know, basically fallen. And I think, you know, and then cassettes, I'm mystified by the growth of cassette sales. I'm old enough that I bought cassettes and I hated that format at the time. but anyway, but whatever the case, that's a thing. Again, like these all have very different sort of economics in the marketplace. And it's so strange. And this is just a product, again, of the law that we live with. It's a very strange thing that the songwriter rates are set through this sort of government process. And so you have these judges and these parties that are doing kind of the best they can in this confusing system, but there's no other like input that goes into the cost of making music that is subject to this kind of like thought process. Like if this was rational and if it was like organized almost like a like, you know, movie production or something, the right balance or whatever the right word is between songwriters and recording artists and publishers and labels, that would just be worked out in deals. But instead we just have this system that we do. I will say though, that one of the consequences, you know, because it's not only different rates for mechanicals, it's entirely different systems for paying the publishers. So the streaming services have a centralized place that they can pay into. It's this Mechanical Licensing Collective, which folks in this webinar may have heard about, but it's essentially a one-stop shop to get the rights that you need. And the MLC takes care of like paying all the money out to the publishers. With physical mechanicals, what we're talking about today, actually like every label is responsible for paying publishers, and they might outsource that to third parties or whatever. But that means in addition to having a different sort of rate structure, they also have these different costs just associated with administering the mechanical royalties, you know, and all of that stuff goes into the calculus of, you know, whether to continue to invest in certain formats or not.
Although I have to mention that, you know, the MLC is unique in that it is not funded by commissions that are paid out of the royalties it collects. It is actually funded by the DSPs directly. So they do pay the administrative costs. It's just they're not paying internally. They are paying for a third party to essentially administer it for them.
Exactly.
So they have administrative costs. It's just kind of, it's done in a different manner. And look, the reason why at the beginning of this conversation I mentioned there was a voluntary industry agreement back in 1978 where the labels and publisher groups sat down and kind of came up with a plan and a way to, in a reasonable way, increase this royalty rate over time, is that they were able to sit down in the market and reflect a market agreement between record labels and music publishers that seemed to work for everybody. It is, as Colin noted, much more difficult to do that in the context of how the rates are set under the Copyright Royalty Board, which is more like a litigation or a proceeding, which becomes extremely expensive and unpredictable because you have these three judges who have a varying understanding of our industry and where it's going, and they're setting the rates over a 5-year period. And so it's very inflexible. It's not flexible. It's not able to change with market changes. Even if we had changed the rates through litigation in the last proceeding, that probably wouldn't have captured the new increase in vinyl sales, because that happened within the 5-year period. And when we were last looking at this, physical across the board was in decline significantly. And so it's very hard to negotiate for a 5-year period before a 3-panel judge, 3-panel administrative body. And it doesn't really reflect the market in the way that it would be if, record labels and music publishers could sit down and actually discuss this and what the best industry outcome would be.
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
yeah.
Another thing, in your video, it did say that for CDs, music publishers and writers normally get 9.1 cents for 10 tracks, which is obviously 91 cents. But because of controlled composition clauses, that is actually usually not the case. They usually get what's called a 3/4 rate. So it's more like 6.8 cents per track, or 68 cents. And for physical product, controlled composition clauses are still very impactful and will still be in effect even with this new higher rate. And so it would not really be 12 cents where the controlled comp clauses are effective. It would be less than that. So
that is true. Yes, that's a good point. I think, and that's, I think we were touching on this before, this notion of, how this is going to affect formats. And, everybody agrees that vinyl's robust right now, but it really may have an impact on CDs, whether or not labels choose to manufacture CDs anymore. It's like been such a slow death, like watching the CD just fall off, slowly fall off the cliff. But this might be the thing that pushes it over. I mean, who knows?
Or maybe Stranger Things will get to the CD era and then it'll become popular again. You never know. But yeah, and that was part of my point of, again, we have to look when we're setting these rates or potentially settling for these rates. We have to look not just at the market. We have to look at what might happen over a 5-year period. How much is it going to cost to litigate this? And what kind of resources do we have to even litigate? And Colin's absolutely right. As we looked at this, initially, we did settle and roll forward the 9.1 cents because we looked at what was a declining market across the board for physical and digital downloads, which did look, Portia, like it was kind of dropping off of a cliff, and not for everyone. Obviously, I think for independent labels, physical is still important. So are digital downloads, but generally in the industry, they were in decline. And then we were looking at the cost of litigation, knowing we would have to litigate interactive streaming rates against the likes of Spotify and Google and Apple, and just we're trying to put resources where the majority of growth was happening. Now, of course, again, the problem with setting rates for a 5-year period is that can change, and vinyl has significantly upticked. CDs have, evened out. Apparently cassettes are upticking, but that was the first I've heard today. And so it's really hard to predict.
And that's a great point, Danielle, because, that's another thing to just bring to the forefront is, the independent labels don't have any kind of, we don't have the deep pockets. I say we, like I'm still an independent label. We don't have the deep pockets to do that litigation. So they can't go before the Copyright Royalty Board and propose anything, because there just isn't that, body out there that has that kind of cash to do
I
that.
will suggest, though, that it is very difficult for us as the music publishing industry to do that as well. It is litigating one CRB proceeding is more than an entire year's worth of dues for our association. So it's unbelievably expensive for us to do this too. So we do have to make difficult decisions in terms of how we allocate our resources and what's, where we need to fight. And that's part of the issue.
Yep.
Very true. We've got a few minutes left. I don't know if anyone has any questions for our guests. You can stick them in the chat or the Q&A. Well, if not, then honestly,
I just wanted to say one more thing, though. I do want to point out it is significant, and for indie labels, I understand the significance. But we've looked across retail pricing in taking the 2021 numbers in CDs and vinyl and in digital download singles and albums, and looked at what the differences are on the 9.1 cent versus 12 cent, and not even taking into account controlled comp, just so we could see. And what we can see is the change will probably be within a $30 million to $43 million difference. And so I understand that is significant for some independent labels, because any $1 million is significant. But on an industry-wide basis, it is just still even the increase is just really relatively small, especially when you're looking at the streaming side, which is now I think in 2021 was at 2.7 billion. So it's, it is a small increase, but, it will help. And many independent, artists are also independent writers. And so it will, I think, certainly help them.
Colin, you have a last word.
Uh-oh. That's well, I'll do that, and I'll respond to Mitchell's question, which was your comment that this could accelerate the decline of CDs, which though smaller these days is still significant. How do you see that situation? I think it's hard to predict. I mean, I think that's going to be very much a function of, honestly, consumer demand more than the cost of inputs. But I do think on the margin, right, if you're a label and you're thinking about whether to invest in the production of CDs, things like the cost of mechanicals will have an impact on that sort of calculation. But my real last word is, people sort of, like, most people don't pay attention to the Copyright Royalty Board and what that group does. I think it's worth following news about that body. They have a much bigger impact on the music industry than I think most people, including many record labels and many publishers. I think publishers are actually more aware than labels. But then most people understand and see, and their decisions have an enormous impact on the direction of the industry. And so everyone in the ecosystem, this is worth paying attention to what they're doing and what they're talking about, how it's run. It's a pretty small agency with enormous influence and impact. So that's my actual final word, is pay attention to the Copyright Royalty Board.
Exactly. Well, thank you guys so much for being with me today. This was really great to see you both, and I appreciate your time.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, you guys, I think we have reached the end. Steve Harkins is back to say his final word.
Well, first of all, Portia, again, thanks for taking a bullet for the team in Hamburg. And John Lennon once said, I may have been born in Liverpool, but I was raised in Hamburg. So it's the Reeperbahn, that area that you want to check out, but go in a small group because we want you to come back safely if you go down that road. But it was a fascinating conversation. Definitely elicited some comments, including from some artists, in terms of, that some of this was precipitated by trying to do a make good on lost revenue when streaming exploded, right, in terms of the take of the artist. I also learned a few new acronyms, DSP, and I think it was MLC as well. So broadened my horizon on that front. And I just wanted to share with everyone that the Physical Business Action Committee is about to undertake with MusicBiz an exercise to see if we can kind of break down associated costs with producing a vinyl album, not just at the level of the plant, but the materials that are into it. And we'll probably be reaching out to a few labels as well as plants to see if we can come up with some realistic kind of breakdown on associated costs to share with retail and labels and distribution. I mean, everyone that was here. And kudos to Music Biz for broadening our horizons. Your group was fantastic. The fact that we have plants now participating, these were areas of the business that were not necessarily part of the organization. So that just demonstrates the great job you're doing. Everyone have a great holiday selling season, fourth quarter. I think we'll be back after the first of the year, hopefully with maybe a cost assessment breakdown. And with that, Portia, be safe and have a beer on me.
Thanks, Steve. Thanks everybody for joining us. We'll see you
Thanks
on the
all.
next Let's Talk Physical. Bye.
Bye-bye.